And so now clarify for me what Section 3 is and how that's different.
Section 3 is triggered with only a certain types of funds. Section 3 refers to a law, a part of a federal law that is triggered, if you will, with HUD funding, so Housing Urban Development. And it has to do with any contracts that are over a certain amount of money and whether or not there's a construction goal. So it would be construction related.
Okay.
And whether the vendors being used are either owned by low-income individuals or have large employment workforce of low-income individuals. So Section 3 is a race-neutral law that many people confuse that, and they think, oh, how many people of color are you bringing in? It's race-neutral. It's all income-based.
Okay.
And it has to do with either being low-income or very low-income. And say, for instance, one kind of example for that would be a household of one individual. If that person makes $35,000, they would qualify within that. So it's not poverty level, it's low income. So there are all these different thresholds in federal law, and there's a grid. And the best way to really look at it would be to look at the grid and see what family size household income you have, and then see if you fall within that. So Section 3 then, as I said, is triggered by HUD funds and in construction projects. And the challenge then becomes whether the threshold and requirements are being met at the construction level as owners, and also at the workforce level, and within construction, whether it would be the subcontractors or the business itself, or the professional services. So there are all these thresholds there, and it's pretty complicated, and so I don't want to kind of get in too much detail, but there's the business side of it and then the workforce side of it. That's kind of the easiest way to look at it. And it's triggered by how much funds are in the project, what the threshold is on the project, and then the city's investment in it as well. So.
And the city has come to an agreement with the federal government, correct?
That's correct.
About its Section 8, or excuse me, Section 3 goals, and how the city will assist in achieving those goals. So can you elaborate on that?
That's correct. Well, it's about a 20-page document. It's called the Voluntary Compliance Agreement, and myself, as well as a member of the City Attorney's Office and then the Director of Planning and Economic Development, PED, were involved with negotiations with HUD on the Voluntary Compliance Agreement. We call it the VCA.
Okay.
And there's a litany of requirements and agreements that we signed off on in terms of provisions. A fair amount of it has to do with the outreach that we do and also the opportunities that we extend in the community. And it spans kind of the scope of not only PED but also my department, and a little bit outside of our department as well. Okay. So there's different aspects of it, and there are the business aspects and then the workforce aspects. But bottom line, what it ends up being is us having a much more coordinated approach and working with the community. And we have laid out in there then various outreach proposals that we'll be working with the community, things such as loans to low-income business owners, subsidies, wage subsidies, and having businesses hire low-income workers and allowing them to bridge that hourly rate, and then subsidies for tools that some workers might need, and we're trying to work that out with the community organization because we'd have to have someone else try to manage that.
So tools being as far as skills or
more kind of
resources?
the tool belt and boots and things of that sort.
Okay.
So we have to work that part out because there'll be some accounting requirements that are attached to that, and the outreach that's needed for it to be fair and things of that sort. So we have to work those pieces out. A big part of it was having what's called a Section 3 administrator, and we recently hired that individual. He just started to work a week from today, a week ago, and has been doing a phenomenal job. Much of it has to do with education and training of the business sector, the contractors, the community-based organizations, the developers, and then even just citywide staff. So we're doing quite a bit of that right now. We intend, big picture, to have what's called a compliance CD, a DVD, and we would record all of our compliance functions. We have about a dozen of them in the department, triggered by either federal law or state law. And we would have all that burned into a DVD that we would show at our pre-construction meetings, and then also on our website. And that's never been done in the city before, but it's our effort in trying to really have community access to the information. It gets really technical as well.
Yeah.
So it'd be really valuable for people to just watch it over and over and really learn about what the requirements are.
That's a great strategy for helping the community become more capable as well and build the capacity. So if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Luz Maria Frias, the director of the St. Paul Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity. I just want to say employment right away. Thank you for joining us. So let's move into some of the other areas. And actually, I think the Section 3 is a good segue into the role of the Minority Business Development and Retention Program, which now falls under your department, correct?
That's correct.
And that is one, the way that they are engaging with the community and contracting for services is also connected in at least one way with Section 3. And what else are they doing? Can you elaborate?
Well, typically the Department Planning and Economic Development, PED, would let out an RFP, a request for proposal, with a sum certain of money that they could then distribute among the community-based organizations primarily. And what we did this year that was a real departure but was really well received is have what's called performance-based contracts. So to have then people respond to us and tell us exactly how they're going to fulfill our mission in terms of our department regarding their activities. So it wasn't their activities on their own, it was make the connection with how that addresses the concerns and priorities that we have. And it was a challenge for some folks because it was a different way of thinking, but we've heard just really positive feedback. And then we try to tie that into our Section 3 work as well to make sure that holistically that these opportunities are being coordinated in a real integrated way so that people know that when we're looking at one aspect of our work that the other aspects are tied closely together, and that as a community we're building capacity as well. So.
Sure. Okay, so we've covered now some PED functions. We've covered some workforce development. Is HR, any function of HR under your?
There's not under mine, but part of the Section 3 agreement, there are some aspects for human resources as well.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But you're probably talking HR as in human rights.
Well, I did want to say human resources, though, because typically when you talk about equal opportunity and all sorts of things like that, you do want to address some staff requirements or characteristics. But I do know that HR still functions as a very strong and really wonderful office, I think, in the city of St. Paul. So then let's go ahead and talk about human rights.
We've done quite a bit in human rights as well, and I'll just give you some examples. One of our investigators had noticed that we were having a steady trickle of complaints on discrimination based on people who needed service dogs in small businesses in St. Paul. And the complaint was that the business owners wouldn't allow this individual to come in with their service dog because they didn't want an animal in the store.
Sure.
And after the third complaint, we sat down and we said, well, this is more of a systemic issue. It shouldn't be just a piecemeal approach. And so we had our Human Rights Division develop these outreach postcards that basically informs business owners of what the law is, federal law, state law, and local laws, allowing people who need service dogs to come into an establishment and not be basically excluded from the business, and how that is a right of someone who needs a service animal. Most of them are service dogs. There are some animals that are not dogs and there are others, but we put together that postcard and then also did a targeted outreach. It was happening mostly on the east side of St. Paul with small business owners, and we met with these business groups both collectively and individually, and we haven't seen any concerns coming from that. So it definitely addressed that concern.